Welcome to the Age of Awakening.
Please identify yourself. Enter.
Hey, Triple P Nation, welcome back to the podcast where this week we're going to explore the tools, tactics, and strategies to help you achieve personal and business mastery. And once again, this week, we're going to be talking about business mastery because it is the mission of this podcast to help you, the entrepreneur and the professional, to learn how to grow in the four key areas of life: mentally, physically, spiritually, and financially. And I'm your host, Dr. Jay LaGuardia. If you didn't know by now, hey, we're at this over 6 years, so we're all close friends, right? So as I mentioned, I'm excited. My guest this week is Dr. Janna Koretz. Janna is a psychologist and the founder of Enmeshment, a therapy practice specializing in the mental health challenges of individuals in high-pressure careers. She spent over a decade helping her clients face and overcome their mental health struggles by developing a unique understanding of industry-specific nuances in the fields like law, consulting, finance, and technology. When I saw the email come from Janna's team and about her topic, I was really excited because, look, this is the stuff that we deal with. And so we're going to talk to her today about why traditional talk therapy oftentimes falls short when it comes to helping professionals who are suffering from stress and burnout and anxiety and things like that. We're going to talk about a topic called career enmeshment. And I have to be honest with you, I didn't tell Janna this. I had never heard that term before, but she's going to explain it to you. And believe me, you're all going to know it. And I kind of give a little personal anecdotal story of my experience with it. And then she's going to sing my tune here about the importance of personal values and the misalignment and how it plays into life and career satisfaction. So it's a great interview with Janna, and one I know you're going to get a lot of value out of. But before we get to Janna, of course, it wouldn't be a normal show if we didn't start our episode with our success snack. And this week, the success snack is about single tasking. Look, you're all busy, you're all doing stuff, trying to juggle a million things each and every day, and oftentimes not so well, because I'm one of those people as well. I find that when I narrow it down to my MITs, my most important tasks, and I focus on those and delegate everything out, I get the most done, and I find myself with less burnout, less stress, the things that Jen and I are going to talk about. So I want you to implement this thing called single tasking. So this is when you dedicate a single day a week where you focus on doing just one task at a time, right? So no multitasking that specific day. Because the facts are, guys, multitasking leads to inefficiency, and it causes us to lose time due to constantly switching from one task to the other. You've heard us talk about flow state. Flow state is when you are so ingrained in one specific topic that you're at max performance, max focus, and you get the most done in the least amount of time. You look up and, 2 hours have gone by, you've gotten a crap ton of stuff done. You go, God, it felt like it was 20 minutes. So single tasking, because you're going to find that you're going to complete tasks faster, better, with greater focus, and it's going to actually free up more time for you. So this approach is going to help in really reducing mental stress, fatigue. It's going to allow you to finish your workday earlier some days, and it's going to give you more energy to do other things when you're done. So single tasking. And listen, if you haven't yet recently, go to your favorite podcast app, hit the follow, like, subscribe, right? You don't want to miss the next great episode that's going to drop here. All the incredible guests and content we have coming for you guys here shortly. And then give us a rating, a review if you're so kind to do so, a 5-star, please. And we would greatly appreciate that. Okay, no further ado. Here's my interview with Dr. Janna. Hey, Triple P Nation, welcome back. As I mentioned in my opening, really excited to have Janna Koretz on the show this week. Janna, I'm really excited about because she speaks the language that you and I discuss each and every week, is how to be a really good entrepreneur, how to be able to navigate through the headwinds of being an entrepreneur and all the impact that it has, and probably none more so than our own mental well-being, right? We talk about the importance of maintaining our physical being, but our mental well-being, when it comes to entrepreneurs, is probably just as important, if not more so. And so Excited to have her on the show because we're really dive into that here today. So Janna, welcome.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here and to talk about all these things.
Yeah. So first of all, tell me how you got into this work. Was this kind of what you pursued when you went to school, or has it kind of come about from some sort of passion that later on you found?
Well, it sort of, I would say, unfolded organically. So when we started Azimuth, we weren't necessarily having this very specific focus. But as time went on, we noticed that was sort of what we were doing all the time, is helping people in high pressure careers. That was just what the nature of the people who are coming to us. I think partly because we are in Boston, but we were getting requests from all over the country, actually. So we really decided to sort of dig deep in that way and focus on helping people in this area, which of course includes entrepreneurs, 100%, which is probably the most, I don't want to say the most stressful job, but certainly one of the most stressful jobs is being an entrepreneur for sure. And, you know, the more we kind of dove in, the more we realized that there actually aren't many psychologists who specialize in this area. Certainly there are coaches and things like that, but we have this unique ability and opportunity really to take the clinical work and clinical skills that we know and apply it into this very specific nuanced area and have it just go wonderfully well and really help people. So we just really got excited about that. And that's kind of how it happened.
So your practice mainly consists of who? Professionals and entrepreneurs? Is that pretty much your target audience?
It's kind of a wide array, I would say. Certainly we have professionals, you know, lawyers, consultants, people in finance, stuff like that. We have a lot of people in academia. We definitely have people running startups, entrepreneurs, small businesses. But I think just the nature also of how the world is now, you know, a lot of people feel very pressured in their jobs because a lot is being required of them. So we're also happy to help anybody who self-identifies as being in a high pressure career. We don't exclude people just because of the work that they're doing.
That makes makes a lot of sense. So it's evolved through the years. So has the acceptance, or maybe a broader approach would be, you know, where mental health maybe 10, 15, 20 years ago was looked at as something you didn't talk about, you know, because of the stigma that went with it. But it seems like the last 5 years or so that it's become way more acceptable to acknowledge that, hey, you know, I struggle at times. I experience stress. I may not have the skill sets or tools how to cope or adapt and deal with the stresses of everyday life. So have you noticed a shift in your practice, in particular around the mindset, no pun intended, of being open to counseling and doing the kind of work that you do?
I have noticed over actually, I would say probably the last 10 years, a more openness to it. I think there's several reasons for that. One is people are seeing friends or family or people they know go and have benefits. So they're seeing that it's not the scary thing. I think the way therapy is portrayed and just in pop culture in general is pretty incorrect. And so I think when people experience therapy, especially good therapy, they realize what they're missing and that they can utilize these wonderful tools and really enrich their life and reach these goals over time. So I think that's part of it. Certainly culturally, we have been allowed to speak of it more freely. But I also think the way that we approach things is a little different because part of the hesitation, I think, about therapy is that it's been medicalized. Right. It's like you have this disorder and you have to have a disorder to bill your insurance company. And here are the 6 solutions that we have decided, you know, work best for this disorder. But really, it's not what it is. It's just become that way for what was supposed to be ease of use, but maybe isn't ease of use in reality. But we don't talk about it in that way because for us, anybody can benefit from, you know, support or conversation, you know. And we have the knowledge and ability to do that. And so I think because our practice personally, we ourselves don't sort of promote this medical model because we think it applies to people, but it also doesn't apply to people. And you can come in and be really stressed out at work and not have a diagnosis, if you will. And in some ways, it doesn't really matter because what we're doing is looking at an individual and we're helping them as a person. And while I think the categories of diagnoses are super important in some ways, I think, you know, it's really hard to capture a human being because they're so dimensional. And so to kind of put people into these broad categories, yeah, like you can do it. And for many reasons, I get why it happened and how it is helpful. But in a lot of ways, people don't identify with that because they feel like it's sort of like a square peg round hole. Like maybe I'm a little anxious, but it's not really about that. And I don't really think the things I've read fit me. And so they kind of shy away a little bit. But we don't really subscribe 100% to that model. We can do it, and we have. And if it's helpful for people, we will. But it's all about the person and what's helpful to them, and not how the like social constructs of therapy have made us think of it, I guess.
Sure. Makes sense. So it's interesting to hear that insurance has screwed up your industry as much as everyone else. Got to fit the claims, And here's the thing, right? Now it follows you or follows the client forever. So if you came in because you're experiencing anxiety, now that stigma or that diagnosis remains with you in your medical records forever. And in some ways, it harms the individual. My own personal experience was, I went in after a really hard race and training that I had done. My electrolytes were off, and I was just noticing some heart arrhythmia, some tachycardia, and went in, saw my provider, and that's what I suspected. And we did some blood work. That was the case. Took care of it. Never had it since. But now when I went for new insurance, they categorized me in this new, higher risk because I went in once for, some cardiac issues. And I would imagine people notice a similar thing as well, too. So therefore, do more people then pursue working with you without utilizing their insurance? And I know it's kind of off topic, but I'm just interested.
Yeah. I think it really depends. Like, we don't bill directly to insurance for a lot of reasons. And so people can choose to use their insurance or not. And a lot of clients that we have prefer the privacy aspect of sort of what you're talking about. They don't really want it on their record. And then some people don't mind. They just want to be reimbursed, and that's the way it is.
Sure.
And so they kind of make that choice. But it does stay on your record, and insurance companies will call and, ask you or us about what's happening in the session. Like, we have to disclose notes if they ask. It's kind of like, who's the customer, like who is actually in charge here, because they feel like they can have those things to make sure they should be paying. But I don't feel like anybody needs to know my client's business. And so there's kind of like a little bit of people, it's a little bit conflictual in that way.
So you talk about, the shortcomings of talk therapy. People are dealing with all sorts of issue, whether it's burnout or stress, whatever case may be. So where do you see the shortcomings of talk therapy, in particular, with people in high pressure careers? What have you noticed and seen that, is really something important that the audience should know about?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. And I have one answer that I can definitely give you right off the top of my head, because a lot of people come in and talk about it, which is the clients that come to us have often been to therapy before, and they've been educated about sort of wellness and things like that. So they know like that they should be sleeping more, they should be eating more vegetables, they should be exercising, all these things, working less, but they can't. But when they go into therapy, the therapist will sometimes try to push on that a little bit, and they don't feel really understood because they're like in a position where like working less really isn't a choice at this moment in time for a lot of reasons. And so there's a disconnect in terms of what people don't feel understood, because they don't feel like people really understand what high pressure careers means and like the nuances about what it takes to start a business. I mean, that's a whole host of hats, right? People have to wear to do that. Or what does it take to be a female trying to make partner at McKinsey? What do you actually have to do to make partner in a law firm? And I think a lot of those nuances are lost because we just aren't taught that they're super important, but they're very important because they're people's lives. And so when our clients come in, they feel really unheard because they feel like therapy is kind of a waste of time, because they feel like they're just being told things that they can't do or that they can't utilize, even though they know they should. And so they feel stuck in that. And that's not anyone's fault. And that's not to speak poorly of other therapists, but that's just what I've noticed people have said to us, is they feel really relieved when they come to us because we're able to work within those constructs.
So how often do you see people, men or women, who have the superwoman or superman complex where, they've got to have the perfect career, they have this mindset where a perfect career, perfect home life, and they're trying to meet all these, standards. And because of maybe it's just impossible to reach, although I don't know if that's, a reality. It certainly is for some to some level of degree based on skill set, knowledge, and application. But how often do you see that with professionals where, they feel like they're falling short either at work or at home, and they feel like they're just not meeting the standards that they set for themselves, and they feel like they're a disappointment, they're a failure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera?
That's probably like 90% of the people that come
Really?
in to talk to us.
Wow.
Yes. And I think part of that is what we kind of talk about, like achievement trauma, which I'll get to in a minute, but people will come in and they have set these. I mean, perfection is not statistically possible, right? It's not a goal. And when you have been in a position over time where achievement is really important to you, whether that's actually internally driven or if it's externally put upon you by cultural values, family of origin, whatever, the things that people have to do, right, to get ahead or to get to where they are in these high pressure careers is a lot, and along the way, depending on how that unfolds, often, there's part of someone's identity or values, or there's some kind of injury there or emotional problems or things that happen that are unresolved that kind of get people to a place where they're never enough. They feel like they're never enough. They can't get to the top there. And so they arrive, whatever that means to them, and they're not happy and they don't understand, I have all these things, like what is missing? It must be me. There's something must be wrong with me. But really, and this is when I know we spoke a little bit before about values, this is where like the values component comes in, because part of that too is living in misalignment with your values.
Sure.
And so if, like what is actually important to you. And so I think it's really hard for people because oftentimes it feels like they're on a treadmill, right? They're just going, they're doing all the things, they're checking all the boxes, they're doing it. And then like, to what end? And also along that way, like you are dropping other things because you have to, and people have regrets about that. They feel anxious about that. And they have, their own needs have been pushed aside in the name of work. And it gets to be really complicated, and those things pile up over time.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. It's, full disclosure, my own personal story is very similar to that. And my audience knows because I've been free and vulnerable about sharing it. Is when I got into business, I graduated college, pursuing the things that people pursue, career, home, family, that kind of thing. And, but I had unresolved emotional trauma from my childhood that I never addressed. In fact, I did what most guys do, didn't really, wasn't really bothering me. Yeah, it's not a big deal. I've dealt with it. But the reality was all I did was continue to suppress it, push it down. And then that pressure cooker continued to build. And being a sort of personality type, it would manifest in anger, and I would just blow up the stupidest little things, And my wife basically said to me, she goes, if you don't get a hold of your anger, I don't know if we're going to be able to make it. And so that was kind of one of those moments where I had to realize, okay, I was either going to pursue something different, or I was going to lose everything that mattered the most to me. And I started with therapy, and it honestly didn't help. Either I didn't have the right therapist, and then I found another therapist, and we started to get to the root causes of what it was. And so it was, a very it was a journey. It was a journey through that experience. But it was interesting. Have you seen, and I can't recall specifically the study, but I just read it recently, where people who pursue happiness are unhappy, but people who pursue purpose find happiness in that purpose. Did you see that?
I have read about that. Yes.
Yeah. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think people have, I have a lot of thoughts about it, but I'll start with, I think people have a idea of what happiness is and how it should feel and what it should look like. And in fact, happiness does not always, or at least consistently, look that way. And so people tend to think happiness means free of like burden, free of emotional burden, free of challenges, free of, problems at home, relationship troubles. And happiness is sort of this levity, but really as adults in general, like we don't have that levity anymore. That's just not what it is. And happiness looks a different way. And so I think people become unhappy because, similar to what we were talking about, what they're aiming for is not actually like where they need to be going, or something like that. And then if you take that, if you take the person who has purpose now, they have things that are in line with their values. They're not chasing like a feeling, they're chasing a value or something to do. And it has a lot of action steps around it. And purpose promotes positive feelings. I mean, not all the time, but sometimes, right? And it promotes a groundedness and a connectedness and all of that. And so that is gratifying for people, as opposed to sort of chasing after whatever happiness feels like or is supposed to feel like. I guess that's how I would distinguish those two things.
I like that. It's a very good description, because you started out by saying, people want to be free of burdens and challenges and obstacles. And if that's the premise, that's the recipe for disaster, because it's, unless you're living a Pollyannish life, and who does, the challenges of life always show up almost every single day. And so therefore, how important then it is for you to kind of reframe that those things are actually good, because it strengthens us, it makes us better, it helps us discern. It helps us oftentimes, because a lot of times when I work with professionals and I ask them about their purpose, and they, and they're successful, they don't know what their purpose is. And so you go through this discernment process, and sometimes we'll start, okay, what is it that you don't want? And as they start to identify the things that they don't want, what they do want starts to come to the surface. Have you experienced that before?
Yeah, I think we try to help people understand that living a life that feels good is not about, chasing the feelings and things like that. It is about being grounded. It's not about, getting rid of. It's living well with. And I think those two things are really different. And I think people don't know what it's like to live well with. And I can talk about that too personally. Like I had, a really significant family personal challenge, like 5 years ago. And I was really excited to get through that trauma and be all done, but that's just not how it works. And I know that, anyway, but even for myself, it's so painful. It's so hard that you just want it to end. And that's the goal, but really it's now part of you. Experiences are part of you. It's how we learn. Like challenges are how we learn and how we figure out who we are and how we show up and how we don't show up. And they're just necessary and they're part of life, and you'll never get away from it. I mean, so how do you then integrate it into your life to either find purpose from sort of like post-traumatic growth or something like that, or just integrate it into your identity so it's not who you are, it's part of who you are. And you can also have all these different other parts of you that have purpose and keep you grounded and things like that. So I think that's a main distinction when people come in that we like to try to make, is you have to live well with. And people don't like that because it's really hard, as you know. It's a hard thing to do. It takes a long time. And I think that's also why in general people shy away from therapy, is, it's hard and it's painful and it does take a while. But then it's so beautiful once it's all come together,
Yeah, it's so true. I love that phrase, living well with. Is that your own? I mean, it's because it really embodies the whole concept of it.
Yeah, that's how I've always talked about it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure other people do talk about it that way, but that's how I have always understood it to be and how I talk about it.
Yeah. And we're going to get to your app that's coming out, because I'm excited about it. A values app. As I mentioned in our pre-show conversation, it's something I emphasize for all my professionals and coaching clients to reassess on an annual basis. In fact, we're hosting a seminar here in November that'll be a part of that experience. But I want to get to first this topic or term called career enmeshment. What is that, and how is this a growing concern in today's work culture?
Yes, career enmeshment is a big one. And I think people don't even know it's happening to them until something happens. So career enmeshment is just the blurring of lines between self, your personal identity, and work. So you become your work. And that can happen over time for a lot of different reasons. And I think people don't really think about it because they are doing their thing. They're doing their family thing. They're on their treadmill, and then something happens, like their company is acquired, or they lose their job, or they're passed up for a promotion or something like that. And they kind of fall apart because if I don't have my job, what am I? And they can't come up with an answer. And that's really scary. And it pulls for a lot of existential questions, which are also scary and hard to answer. And part of all of that is the values piece. That's how we kind of get through part of that. But it happens all the time where people, and I think it's certainly our work culture in general. It does, I mean, you're supposed to be working all the time. People can't even take real vacation anymore. So that certainly contributes to it. And I think a lot of people who are in high pressure careers have a lot of self-driven interest in achievement and things like that. And it's a slippery slope into being all consuming in a way where you personally don't have, like, all your eggs are in that one basket. You don't have anything else about how you understand yourself. And kind of one of the things we talk about, like, how do I know if this is happening to me, is if you, like, let's say you went to a party or, you know, at a friend's house or anywhere social, whatever, your kids on the playground, you're meeting other parents and they ask about you. And all you can think about is when you identify things about you, like, I am a lawyer and I do this kind of law and blah, blah, blah. And you can't come up with anything else. It's not this and that. It's just this one thing. And that happened to me, actually, when I started Azimuth, probably a couple of years in. I went to a party and someone asked me what my hobbies were. And it was hard at the time not to laugh because I was like, hobbies? What do you mean? All I do is, like, do this business stuff and, you know, see clients or whatever. But I remember feeling so uncomfortable, and I'm sure I made up something just to get out of the conversation. But that was really eye-opening to me, where I was like, wow, I was this whole person, and now I feel like I don't even know who I am anymore. And so that is kind of where the career enmeshment piece comes in.
It's a great description. It immediately came to mind an experience. 10 years ago, I retired out of practice. And for 25 years, you know, that's what I did. But really, if I had to be honest with myself, that's really who I was, per se, you know. But the reason I chose to leave was all this work I had done the previous 25 years on myself, learning about myself, what made me tick. And it's interesting because when people ask me now, what do? And I do a lot of different things. I say, I inspire millions of people to live happier, healthier, more prosperous lives. Like, that's what I do. Now, I have subcategories of each of those things, how I do it, whether it's our fitness studios or clinics or real estate, or wherever the case may be. But I can totally see, and I'll come full circle to this story, is my father-in-law, we had purchased his practice, and, you know, he was well-renowned, and that's who he was. And when he became in advanced career, he started to lose a little bit of his mental faculties, and he could no longer practice. He passed very quickly because he lost his complete and total identity, and he was very unhappy. And this was one of the most gregarious, you know, wonderful human beings you'd ever meet, but that's who he was. And when that was no longer available, that was it. He lost himself and passed very quickly. And I'm sure that's not a unique story.
Yeah, yeah. And it's sad, right? Because people have so much to offer, and you don't know, right, until these things happen, until you're no longer able to do your job for whatever reason, and then you have this loss that's unbearable. It's quite upsetting.
Yeah. So how much because the work that you do is really about going within, right? It's asking difficult questions, whether asking of self or someone guiding them through that process to hear through the noise of what they're saying, and then, you know, kind of, again, to discern it and boil it down. We're so inundated with distraction in today's world. It's so much more challenging to get quiet, right? To reflect. For some people, it's prayer. Some people, it's meditation. Some people, it's doing a cold plunge, whatever it might be. How much of that is in your recipe to help these people and overcome the challenges that they're dealing with, is having them really start to plan and schedule time to be with themselves and to go within and have these kind of thoughts, and maybe reading or whatever the case may be? How much of that is part of your work that you do?
It's a lot, actually, because per your description, right, the distraction piece is huge. And it's so insidious now with phones and computers and multitasking. Like, you don't even realize how far your attention is pulled in many different directions until you aren't able to do that anymore. And I had a client once, this is kind of an extreme example, but, you know, she went camping and there was no cell phone reception. And she said she felt so uncomfortable. It wasn't even that she didn't know what to do with herself, but she went fishing, she did all the things, but she was like, it just felt so weird to not like, I would like reach for my phone. I don't even know why. And then realize I didn't have it or it wasn't working. And it was just this habit that she had. And by the end of the time she went for 2 weeks, she was like, this is great. I don't actually care what like people are doing on Instagram, and I don't need to check my email. I'm on vacation. And it was really freeing to her because she was able to at least let go of that piece of it. And then there is then the part about sitting with your own feelings, which is impossibly difficult and really, really hard. But it's really important. And I think a lot of why people have all sorts of problems in life is because they can't sit without anything else. It's uncomfortable for them to sit with themselves for a lot of reasons. And
Sure.
I understand that. And, my husband always makes fun of me because he is always listening to podcasts. His headphones are always in, he's always learning, which is great. And like, I'll, take the train to work and walk 40 minutes without anything. And he's like, it's so weird that you just do that you can just sit. I'm like, well, no, I don't need any more noise. Like, I learn all the time. I need like just a second to just not look at my phone and not have all these things and pretend like it's the 90s and I'm going to meet someone for lunch and they can't reach me and I'm whatever, and I think it's really important. And, even for, this is a little off topic, but you think about like teenagers now and social media and how people are navigating that. A lot of people are saying, and the research is showing, like phone usage, especially if not, managed well for teenagers, is really detrimental. And then
Sure.
they stop learning how to do social stuff in real time. And COVID certainly exacerbated that for all of us. But, how are you? Or in a professional context, I know a lot of people work from home now, but not always. And so how can you be professional? You don't learn that on the internet. You learn that by watching other people in the office and, trying out different things and seeing how your coworkers react. And it's like a social activity. And so that's the other piece too. Like a long time ago, I did an article with the Boston Globe about how do you make friends in your 30s. And the first thing I said is like, when you're in line at Starbucks, like don't look at your phone, and not to say you're going to necessarily be best friends with the person in front of you, but like maybe, they have a pair of sneakers you think is really cool and you want to know where they're from, or, just like observing your environment and being present is step one. Like you have to know who's around you and what they're doing. And I think that's really hard, right? We're all like, oh, great, I'll take this time to order the thing on Amazon or check my email or like respond to this thing real quick. And I do that all the time. But if you really, there are many reasons to not do that, I guess. And so to answer your question, yes, it is a big part of what we do.
I think the last statistic I had seen, the average adult checks their phone 115 times a day.
Yeah. That's not surprising.
Ridiculous. And then also another interesting tidbit to that is tech executives do not allow their kids to have a phone. I think 16 is what I had read, which is what most of the research is showing because their brain's so undeveloped prior to that point, from an emotional standpoint, to be able to deal with the inputs and all the things that go on. Look, anything that has the power of good has the power of bad as well too. And left to immature, minds, it can certainly go in bad places for young people. And it's something that I highly promote for people with kids. My own granddaughter, my kids are not going to let her have a phone until at least 14, but they'll probably be closer to 16. But the thing is, you're absolutely right, is we're losing human connection, right? That what binds us as sentient beings where, it's having that conversation with someone in a phone line. It's just smiling at someone, makes even if I never even have a conversation with, if they smile at you, you just feel better. Like, nice. You smile back, opening a door for someone, just greeting, say, have a great day or something like that. That doesn't happen when your face is in a phone. And it's really a societal issue that we have to be very, very intentional moving forward as a society. And leaders, I think, really need to be speaking about this is what's going to bring people back together again, so we can start having conversations with each other rather than at each other.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. I think part of, and I know everyone loves to work from home. And so I get a little bit of pushback when I say this, but it's not actually very good for us to be working from home all the time. And I think there are many reasons why working from home is good. And I think COVID made us all stop and reevaluate that. And that part of COVID was helpful, I guess. But now it's like your groceries are coming to your door, you are on Zoom calls all the time. You can exercise in your house. Like, you don't actually have to leave. And because we figured out how to do that, which is fine and sort of convenient, but the piece that is missing is the social aspect. And I know sometimes, we go out, we meet with friends and things like that, but a lot of, like, to your point, social interactions, especially let's say at the office, building networks with colleagues and relationships with them, it's not about the 1-to-1 hour meeting each week. It's when you're on the way to the bathroom and you stop and chat for 2 minutes, or when you notice someone is eating like something that looks really good and you ask them what it is. It's those are actually the interactions that build over time into relationships, and we're missing all of that. And it's hard to learn how to do any of that if you're not present with other people. And we are social beings, and we need those interactions, we need those connections. And so trying to figure out how to manage that in a very busy life is very hard, but it's important. And as much as I love to sit at home, turn over some laundry between phone calls, I go into the office, because I know that I need that. I know my team needs that. We all come in on, everyone has to be in on Thursdays because we have to see each other. And that's really important, even if we're not talking about like clinical work. So.
Sure. I 100% agree with you there. It's very difficult to build trust around a team when you're never together. You can't do it on a two-dimensional, screen. It's got to be way more than that. It's the unspoken communication, right? It's the vibe and energy that you feel. It's the body language. It's the tone. So much of that is you just can't feel through a screen, or a text or an email. That's why I never have any kind of meaningful conversation, text, email. But so do you feel, because I want to get into the values part of this, because I'm excited to talk to you about this and get your thoughts on it. Do you feel that the disconnect is what has caused an acceleration with a lot of the increased depression and anxiety and so on and so forth?
Yeah, for sure. And,
Okay.
I haven't read the most recent literature about it, but, there was a whole set of research that came out probably like 2 years ago about how loneliness was killing people. And especially for people who are elderly, and as their social networks get smaller, or they live in assisted living or what have you, it's really, really bad for people. It does promote depression, anxiety, and all other kinds of other somatic issues too. People need to be connected to something, and definitely people, but the need to feel grounded in that. We're not like these solitary beings, we're a tribe. We're a tribe.
Yes, we are.
Tribal, Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into the values part. I'm interested because you talk about the misalignment of life and career, and how that, is when there's probably a misalignment with values as well too. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So I think because people don't know they can or should, or they haven't been given permission to, or just culturally, it's not something that we really talk about. People assume the values of those around them. Right? Like I assume and this for everyone, like I assume whatever my parents valued, I assumed it was what we were valuing until I was older. You just kind of go with that. And then, if you're on a treadmill to work and things like that, you're not really thinking about it because you're doing other things, or your work culture or the bigger culture around you, like wherever you are, like even in the United States, like work culture around that. Everything has their own values that get placed upon you. And we just, I think, absorb those more than we question them. And so oftentimes when people are unhappy with their life, whether that's work or not, it is because the things that are actually important to them are not relevant to what they're doing at all. And they don't really know that, partly also because, like values change over time. People grow up, they learn things, they gain perspective, events happen, and they change what's important to them too, even if they're not conscious of that. So over time, they find themselves unhappy in something that might have used to made them happy, but no longer does. And so really getting back into what is important to you and why is so, so important, because that is actually the basis for so much in terms of living across all kinds of, domains.
I agree. I've often said the number one source for stress in our life is when we live incongruent with our values. And if you ask people what their values are, most cannot, like, if, what are your top 2, 3 your values? They even have to pause because they don't really consider it. So is there a process that you teach? How often do you recommend people do a personal assessment on their values? And do you use that kind of as a tool then to help guide people as they're making plans for future goals and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think you could do it formally or more informally, and depending on how people want to do that, you can. So certainly thinking about it through conversations or books, or like Acceptance and Commitment Therapy Act has a really great component to it that's about values, and they have great workbooks and things like that. So you can do that. And partly why we're creating this app is to do just what you're talking about. So figuring out what your values are. We have on our website Shlomo Schwartz's values. It's like a values tool, but there are many other ones that are out there. I'm sure you have one that you like to use. And through that, you kind of figure out what your top values are. And the app is a journaling app. So it's basically you're journaling about your day and then rating how in alignment you are with your values over the course of the day. And then there are trends to that you can see. And also there are prompts as part of that. So things that I might ask my clients in session, or, things that are related to the actual value itself. Prompts to help people start writing and kind of figure out what is important to them and kind of help them with that process, because it is so important. And I just think that it's so overlooked, and that is a great way to start. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of a long game, as you know. So it's not, I think people are like, great, I'm going to do this quiz. I'm going to be all set. I'm going to find out my values, move on with my day. But that's not what it is. That's just a starting point to think about what it is that is important to you and why,
I agree.
Why is important.
If, again, my own personal experience is I like to do it over a 3 to 5 day period of time, and, and start through step 1 and give it some thought, come back to it, especially when I'm starting to identify those core values, you know what I mean? And one of the easiest ways I've always recommended is just start writing down things that you like. That it could be your family, it could be, working out, or it could be travel, or it could be, painting, whatever the case is, right? Just start writing a bunch of things that, and then talk about qualities and attributes of people that you admire the most, that are important to you: integrity and honesty and commitment. And, and as you start to formulate these, it could be 20, 30, 50 terms or words, then you start to compress it down. And I don't know if that's similar to something, that how you kind of work through it, but I found that to be helpful. But it is a process that takes time, because you need to step away from it and you start to look at it and go, okay, well, that's important, but it's not that important as this is.
Yeah. I think that's a great way to start. We do that. We tend to end up, just by the nature of how people come to us, we start with work, just in that domain, sort of, well, what is not working at work? What do you like? And what do you want it to look like? And oftentimes people, like you said, don't know what they want it to look like, but they definitely know what they don't want it to look like. And so that, which is equally as important. So yeah, generating those lists about, and about attributes of others, but also of yourself. Like I talk a lot about going back to your personal networks and not necessarily your professional networks, because people you've known over time, who many of us, fall out of touch with, friends, even, family, all sorts of people, just people we went to school with, they have known us over time for a really long time. And so if we get lost, I find that finding those connections, rebuilding those connections for a lot of reasons, but also because, oh, right, I am the kind of person who used to do this. And I did that because I really thought this other thing was important. I forgot about that. And even if it's small, it's really, really helpful to add to sort of that list. And I think people don't think about, they think about networks, right? We use that word so liberally in professional career, but we don't use it for our personal reflection and personal kind of happiness. And I think that's also a key element to it. If you're stuck, that's a really great way to begin.
So when does your app come out, and what's it going to be called?
So the app is called Clearly, and beta will be out in October. And we should be rolling in the new year, new year, right? To help people kind of, if people are into that, kind of help them along with that. So we're almost done. We're just fixing up some bugs.
Super. Yeah, I know that's a lengthy process, and oftentimes not at an inexpensive one as well, too.
Yeah, I know, but it is so important. Like, this is how passionate I am about it. I'm like, we have got to get this done for people because I need people. I just think it's, when you talk about purpose, right? Like, my purpose, one of my purposes is to help people have the information I have so that they can live lives that are more congruent to whatever they want that to look like. And this is a great way to do that more at scale, because we can't see like everybody in our practice, we have limitations. To, all my clinicians, I would never ask them to, but they're, they don't see 40 people a week. They, we have to cap it at stuff. So this is my way of doing that.
Well, it's interesting. People have asked me before, why did you start a podcast? I said, well, it was really simple because it's part of my purpose statement, right? It's to, serve millions. Well, I can go speak at conferences, hundreds or thousands of people, but to get to millions, I'm going to need to scale. And this was a great medium to start that. So when and it's interesting, I was at a conference once. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Dr. John DeMartini. And so we were there. I was there with my wife, and I've been asking myself this question. It was many, many, many years ago. And like that purpose statement just came in my head. And it was like, from that moment on, I knew the direction of my life. So the point I'm trying to say is and you said, right, there could be different purpose statements for different aspects of your life. Totally get it. But once you have that level of clarity, it's very empowering. In a sense of that you really got a good sense of who you are and the direction you need to go. And then I say, it's always, once you know that purpose, everything filters through that lens. Does this meet your purpose? Does this serve your purpose? And not that everything has to in the moment, but long-term, does it? That's the easiest way for me to make decisions. Should I pursue this or shouldn't I pursue this? Yeah,
it becomes clear really quickly. And to me, that is the levity that people are looking for when they're looking for this happiness and joy, is actually the freedom that values give you to come back to a purpose. And, people have been doing this in religion forever. In religions, you have a set of core values, set of things that people believe, and they do. And so when something comes up, they know, like, well, is that congruent to these values that I hold? It happens to be through religion, right? And it's easy to make those choices. And so it becomes very easy when you know what's important to you. There is a freedom of the decision fatigue, I guess, and the worry that comes with that. Like, did I make the right choice? Well, you're going to know that. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, it's that old paralysis analysis, you're so in your head, you can't even see clearly to come up with some sort of decision-making process. So it really is what Dr. Janna is talking about is a wonderful, wonderful tool. You got to check out our app here and make sure that, you utilize these tools. There's so many great tools out there that's really going to help elevate your life and lead you in a direction to move in a more, specific way that you'll, again, like I said, I find when you live with purpose, you find happiness in that purpose. So as we bring this around, final question I have is, because, we started talking about professionals and entrepreneurs and things like that. So for leaders, in these high pressure environments, how can they psychologically improve the health of their workplace?
Oh, I love this question. I just wrote an article for someone about this. So basically you're saying like psychological safety and psychological wellness in the workplace, like what's a way into that hasn't been thought about. And again, not easy, but easy once you start it, is I think leaders need to do a better job of leading by relationship and not leading by other ways. So, there's so many corporate trainings of all these different ways to be a leader. Everyone's taking the DISC assessment, like who, Myers-Briggs, all that. It's all fine. But what's going to really help your team is if you know who those people are and you know what they like and they know who you are and they trust in you, because again, that is how trust is built. That's how, and people work well when they feel comfortable and safe and they trust that what they do, whether it's a mistake or asking for vacation or whatever, is going to be well received because they know the person that they're talking to. And I don't mean like no personal boundaries at all, but, if people are talking about a wedding they went to, being curious about that. If you notice that somebody is upset after a meeting, like asking about that. If you don't have time in the moment, like finding a concrete time to do that, so you meet with that person later. And then the purpose isn't necessarily solutions either. The purpose is to hear what people are saying so they feel heard and they feel validated, because everyone's opinion is important. And then they know that you're a safe person, and that just like snowballs into itself. And then it becomes easier, for them to ask for vacation, which then it becomes easier for you to, know that if they need to put in an extra hour or two because there's some deadline, like they're obviously going to do it. And because, it's a give and take. It's a relationship. It's a real connection. And that's how you're leading people. You're not leading them by, some manual that said you should do it a different way. That takes a lot of time because, right, you have to get to know people. And certainly leaders that we see who are, let's say they're in the C-suite or something, right? They have teams and teams and teams and teams of people under them, but that's something that they can do with their immediate team, and they can teach that to, managers and things like that. And this is a tangent, but I think a lot of people who have like managerial positions don't want them necessarily, or they don't really know how to manage their teams because no one's ever taught them how to do that. And yes. I think once that gets put into the culture, the bus leaves the station and like things are going, like they're running, and it's easy. It's so much easier.
I 100% agree with that. That was my own personal experience too. When I first got into business, I had no concept of leadership. I couldn't even lead myself at that point. I was so immature in so many ways. And it was a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. And so the business, the culture, everything reflected my lack of leadership skills. It's the thing that, we've heard so often. It sounds trite, but it's so true, right? People don't care what you know until they know that you care. And John Mackey wrote it in his book, the CEO of, I think he's former CEO of Whole Foods, and heart-centered leadership. We've got to emotionally engage with people, really know that you're there, and that, they're more than just an employee number. And I understand in large Fortune 500 companies, very, very different. I've never been in that world, so I can't imagine how you do that. I'm sure you do it on the sub-managerial level, but I 100% agree, particularly with small business entrepreneurs. They get into business, they have an idea or a concept to sell a product or service, and they're really good at it, but they have no idea how to lead a team. And so they could have the best widget or the best service, but it doesn't really matter because they don't have the infrastructure and the team necessary to turn that into a successful business.
And then that gets in the way of their purpose, right? So it all is full circle.
Sure does.
And so, so I think that's a great place to start and a great sort of goal to be in.
For sure. This has been a lot of fun, Dr. Janna. I really appreciate you coming on. It was a great conversation, an important conversation. I think that my audience certainly is going to reflect upon, because here we are. We're about ready to approach fourth quarter. This is when people start planning for the next year. And I always say, start with yourself first, right? How do you need to grow? Because growing people grow businesses. So if you're stagnant, your business is going to be stagnant. What skill sets do you need to learn? What mindset changes? What limiting beliefs do you need to deal with? And this is going to be a great resource for them to tap into.
Yeah. I'm happy to talk about it anytime. I think all of this is so important. And, we want happy, healthy people running happy, healthy companies. So the more we can get the word out, the better.
So that's the Clearly app, right? So Clearly.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So guys, look for that coming up soon. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Janna, for coming on. And as I always say, Triple P Nation, you be you. Just be the best you. And I promise you'll always empower your dreams, ignite your passion, and accelerate your prosperity. Until next week, be well.